Welcome to the Gaming Grounds channel. I am your host, Action Jack, and today's video is on the announcement that Xbox themselves have just made. This video is going to be centered around my thoughts on it, but then also my thoughts on consumers and content creators centered around this conversation or this announcement, if you will. So let me give you some context if you're not aware. Xbox themselves have not been doing very well within the console space nor the software space. Even their big names such as your Halo, your Gears, I can't really say Forza, but those three main hitters are kind of their go-to. And anybody knows, like, if you're going to be a console manufacturer that has first-party exclusives, you kind of need a bigger platform or a bigger library than that. Honestly, at this point, Sony and Nintendo are the only ones that provide a bigger library. But then you can kind of go to Nintendo when it comes down to variety of said library. But that's not the point. The whole point is you have to have games for people to play, right? You have to have a reason why people come to your console and choose your console. Now, we have been long gone from the space that people buy one console and call it a day. There's a lot of people that I know and people that, are on social media that'll tell you that they have multiple consoles or they'll do PC in one of these consoles, right? It's the ease of use. Not everything is on every console, and if the first parties are enticing enough, you will actually buy all three. Myself included. I've purchased all three before, but at the same time, I don't hold on to consoles if I feel like you as a company are not a great representative of what it is to come. So I will resell it. I currently do not have a PlayStation anymore for that purpose. I'm not a huge fan of Sony's first party games anymore, solely because they tend to have great stories, but playstyle tend to be the same minus a Spider-Man, right? So when we look at what it is that people go to these consoles for, it can differ. It's very subjective as into why you would select said console. Now, when we look at Xbox hasn't been itself since the 360. As far as new IP, they really haven't produced any. And even if there were some new games that were exclusive to that console, it didn't necessarily get supported per se. So the first game that comes to mind for me is Sunset Overdrive. Did not get the support that it should have. Hi-Fi Rush did not get the support that it should have. So that's just to name two out of a handful that they may have brought into the console space. At one point in time, I thought Cuphead would have been exclusive, but in all honesty, I don't think it would have succeeded if it would have stayed in the Xbox space. And it all starts with how you set the foundation for your particular console, right? So if I look at a Nintendo from jump has always expressed we are for everyone. So they can show up with a shooter, they can show up with something kiddie, they can show up with something a little bit more fun with a platformer, they can show up with any genre game, and it wouldn't be a Nintendo, we can't believe you did this. Now, it used to be like that when it came down to mature games, but once again, something subjective, and Nintendo has made mature games in the past. It's just people tend to have a blind eye to Nintendo because they always think of them as kiddie opposed to just for everyone, and that's family friendly. Sony kind of went into that same space in the beginning, but then kind of went to this over-the-shoulder, story-based, movie-based type game, and that's kind of where their crowd is at. But then when you look at Xbox, it was always the dude bro, Dorito, shooter type game with the one-off of Forza being the racer. So when you look at that crowd for Xbox, it tends to be those that like multiplayer shooters, and that's just where they've always got their success. But of course, as time goes along, people have differing tastes. They tend to grow in taste. They tend to change over time, and so that's what tends to happen. And this is kind of where Xbox put themselves solely by staying in one genre, staying in one house, and it didn't get them far. And then also too, with them being an American company, you don't get a lot of love everywhere, unfortunately, especially in that Japan space that they're still trying to break into. It's just not working for them. So everybody's not as embracing, when it comes down to having some outside source coming and trying to find some space of relevance within their business line, within your area of country or whatever, what have you. So Xbox has had a rough time. But to kind of give the pros of what they brought in, which we've stated just now, multiplayer. They brought in, great multiplayers. They brought in great first-person shooters. They brought in great controllers. And then even in this case, quick resume, fantastic. And then also to being able to, have so many areas for you to play your games. Now that I've laid the foundation of what it is that, or why Xbox could potentially be in this space, now I want to talk about why this is a good idea and why I have such an issue with the consumer and then content creators when it comes down to all consoles, not just Xbox, but all consoles in general. So the reason why I think this is a good space for Xbox, right? Xbox has always known as a company, they can't break in. Like they just can't get into that space. They can't get to that success like Sony and Nintendo. Now, that's up to you to decide why they can't get into that space. But for me personally, I think it's because of their software. Their software is not as appealing. And then when you started off with just doing one genre and that was your claim to fame, you put yourself in a box, and therefore your main consumers don't want anything else. And that tends to be a problem. And that's not me just thinking that. You can look at the sales and tell that most do not buy anything outside of the shooters on Xbox or outside of Forza. They don't buy anything else. That's the same lie they tell you about Nintendo, but you can tell other games and other genres sell on Nintendo. But with an Xbox, is you can tell they don't sell. That's why other places, some games don't come to Xbox. Like they have to go and have those conversations to get those games to come over, such as RPGs, because those games just don't sell there. But I think this will be a smart move for them per se, because if you want a console, you can play Xbox games. If you own a PC, you can play Xbox games. If you own one of those handheld PCs like a ROG Ally, I don't think you can do Steam Deck yet because they just have certain things that won't allow you to do it with Linux, but you can play Xbox. Me having a Quest 3, you can do cloud gaming with Xbox. They have the Fire Stick up here, the mobile clouding. So it's all around a place for them to get your attention, be in your home, be in your space without you having to spend $300 to $500 for a console to play those games. You buy our 1,000 controllers that we have in different setup or whatever, and you can play your games. Now, let's make it very clear that outside of console and outside of PC, you're streaming these games. So there is no download to your Samsung TV. There is no downloading to your Quest 3. There's no downloading to your Fire TV. You're cloud-based gaming. So if your internet is not up to snuff, then you're cloud-based gaming. And I don't even think all games are cloud-based. So I think it's very misleading as well to say like, okay, oh man, I can go play whatever game on Xbox on cloud, and all I have to do is pay them $20 a month. No, that is not at all how that works. And even if you look at like a slower paced game like let's say Hellblade 2, and you try to do cloud gaming, I've tried that on my Quest 3 and it's very jittery from time to time. Sometimes you can go out and come back in and it works a little bit better, but it's so hit and miss that I don't think it's something that is viable for you to say, oh, I'm gonna buy another product to play cloud gaming. We as America in general are just not there for that internet infrastructure. It's just not there yet. So I think this is a good way for them to kind of spread their wings, do their marketing, get everything where they need to be, because from just the console space, it's not going to happen. They have too much negative space around them. They have little to no software at this point as far as games that can only be exclusively found on Xbox. And then also too, even if they were to acquire or find newer games, if it's not a shoot 'em bang bang or a racing game, that demographic tends to show that they won't purchase it. So that is a problem that they've created for themselves. No one has created that problem for them, but it is a problem they've created for themselves. So I think it's a positive for them to go this route, for them to put their games elsewhere. Because Xbox and Sony are known to take hits early on in the console generation because they eat the cost of what typically these consoles would cost you, to where, this is just what it is. This is where we are. This won't take the consoles away. That option will still be available. When we talk about the handhelds, they say some ways down the line, but at the same time, I know they'll be partnering with other companies like a Asus or a Lenovo or whoever to make a handheld to make that a little bit better, which I think will be smart. Like make that Xbox app a little bit more usable or a little bit accessible, if you will, when it comes down to these handheld PCs, because it's really a bad app. Like they need to do a little bit better on that. And then I've seen people that are comfortable with the mobile aspect of just clipping their phone to the controller and call it a day. Like that's fine. Like they know where they stand. They know where they failed. They know where they can't enter into. So they're going the cloud route to compete with your Googles and your Amazons to ensure that they have that space, because the console space is dead for them. Like they just can't do anything in that space. They can still exist, but they're never going to win that fight, because you cannot take over Europe from Sony. You can't take Japan from Nintendo, and America, you can't even strive here. Like that, I think that's a big problem in itself too. So, at this point, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. Now, here's my problem with the content creators and the consumer when it comes down to this decision by Xbox. Understand that you helped them get to this point. When we talk about companies having to do layoffs, when we talk about companies having to pivot because things are not working, we talk about companies having to find ways to sustain their business line or try to find ways to reinvent themselves going into the future. Content creators and consumers are the first ones to shit on that idea. Like they don't like change. And we've seen that time and time again, whether it's from a controller standpoint, from a gaming standpoint, what have you. They don't like change. Now, sometimes change is not for the better, but sometimes it is. And it's okay for you to not have that vision before the company can truly flesh it out. That's not your job to know that vision. That's what the company's job is, to know that vision. None of us have a stake in any of these companies. So if they say this is the route we're going to go, obviously they see something that is substantial for them to go in this direction. Now, this may not be something that you want, because most of you want to continue to spew the same console war narrative that you've been doing for years on end. That's how most of you got your channel. This in turn could possibly cause your channel to fall. I've seen more Sony people speak about Xbox and more Xbox people speak about Sony than their own personal platform, and that in itself is stupid. Like you should not be talking about the competitor when your console of choice should be doing their job. And to me, honestly, I feel like even though Xbox is the one that did the first pivot, Sony's not far behind. Sony truly is not far behind. And even though they're successful within their console, the software don't line up. The software sales do not line up with Sony's console sales. It truly does not match up. There's not 1 to 2 games that is not third party that match up to the console sales that Sony continues to produce. Their console sell very well. I think what the lowest selling console right now is the PS3, but in reality, their numbers as far as their games are concerned should be at the levels of a Mario, a Zelda, whatever the case may be. Like it should be that high because they sell so much more. The Switch is Switch is one of those things to where for Nintendo is not consistent. It's one of those things that happen every so often. Their consoles are successful, but not at the 100+ million rate that Sony tends to always reach. So while this is something that, a lot of people will speak about now and say, oh, let's make fun of this, you're going to give them traction and it's going to get in front of people, which is going to be very helpful. I can play Xbox on my laptop, a console, a PC handheld, a Quest 3, a Fire TV, a cell phone, a TV. Like, it's going to get to that point. Now it's up to Xbox to usher this in the best way possible. Because once again, if I see this, I'm thinking I can play Xbox games anywhere. And in reality, I can't, because if my internet's not up to snuff, if the game is not cloud-based, then really I can't. Like, I truly cannot play Xbox anywhere, and therefore my TV is not an Xbox, or my Quest is not an Xbox. So I think they have to get that marketing correct, and they have to get it right. But I do like this pivot for them to focus on software. This will give them an opportunity to truly try to, make something different, and then reach to other crowds that will actually purchase said games that they make. Because like I said before, the Xbox crowd just will not purchase those other games. It just won't happen. I'm curious to see how successful Diablo is. I'm curious to see how successful Super Lucky Tales was when it came out. Even though I think it started off on VR and then it came to Xbox. I'm curious to see how those games did, even from a third party standpoint. I'm curious to see how some of these other games did. Like Dragon Quest just came out, the remastered just came out. I'm curious to see what it does. I'm curious to see how anything outside of sports and shooters do on Microsoft's platform, because if it's not doing well there, then what do you want Xbox to do? Because it's not the console. The console is a great console. It does what it's supposed to do. It functions well. Quick resume is amazing. And the idea that you could easily install a game before you purchase it. Install a game on your console before you purchase it. And then when you get to a game, recognize you have that game, and then bam, you're straight. You don't have to sit there and wait for the install to happen. So this console has great features, has a great controller. It looks great. It functions great. The software is the problem. And then I feel like the atmosphere they created is the problem. So there's nothing else they could have done. They could not have gone and switched to another consumer base other than sending it somewhere else. So yes, you're going to see Xbox games on Switch 2 or successor, whatever you want to call it. You're going to see Xbox game on PC, Xbox games on PlayStation, because that's a different demographic. And as a business, I'm trying to reach everybody as much as possible. This example in itself is very telling as well. When you look at Disney, I don't know if anybody remembers this. Before we got Disney Plus, Disney was talking about releasing their own streaming box. Like, it was going to be, you have to buy the streaming box in order for you to get Disney Plus. I don't even know if they were calling it Disney Plus at the time, but you had to get that streaming box to watch Disney content. As you can see, that did not come to fruition, and they chose to put themselves everywhere. You can download Disney Plus on your phone. You can download it on your TV. You can download it on your consoles. You can download it on your tablets. You can download it anywhere that you can get to an app store. Sometimes you have to cast out your product to a widespread opposed to keeping it exclusive, especially when you know that the group that likes your content the most will not show up for anything new. Unfortunately, that's just what it is. So while I applaud them, at the same time, hopefully this is opening eye as into what environment they created. But then once again, for that Sony group, don't think you're escaping this, because you're going to be in the same boat pretty soon too, because Sony has gone that high graphic, high movie, narrative driven, over the shoulder type ordeal. And then the only one that really gets out of that window somewhat is Spider-Man. So when we when we look at the infrastructure or the things that Sony built, they put themselves in this position as well too, because they used to be for everyone like Nintendo. When they first came out the gate, there was a bevy of games that you can get. Now granted, they were exclusive to PlayStation or PlayStation 2, and they didn't go to Xbox or GameCube at the time, but they were not first party games. They were just only on PlayStation 2, and they allowed a lot of their IPs to go away. They allowed a lot of those third party companies to go and sell elsewhere. So they're not too far behind Microsoft. It just looks better for them because they have system sales. It looks better because they just dropped the Pro in your face. It looks better because they have a VR in your face. So understand, under that veil, they ain't too far away from them. So at the end of the day, when Microsoft figures this all out, figures out the cloud situation, has an ability for you to go and play their software, and they get software put together over the next 5 to 6 years, they'll be in a better place. But Sony has to do the same thing. They have to expand. They have to, and even Sean Layden said the same thing. The creativity is dead. He didn't say it, I'm paraphrasing, but it's dead. So at this point in time, they're both in the same pot. It's just one stinks more than the other one. So that's just what it is. But they're both in the same melting pot. The only console that truly, or manufacturer that have first party exclusives, will probably be Nintendo, because they chose to go on the creativity route opposed to this graphical route that these two went on, thinking that was going to hold them up. But law of diminishing returns. So now you have to depend on your creativity. Now you got to find that software. Nintendo already got it. Now all they got to do is the easy part, which is up the ante as far as what things look like and how they run, which I don't think they're too far away from, especially if we're going to go the software route. But yeah, I just don't like how content creators are presenting this, because I think at some point it takes away from their cash flow of what they can talk about. But at the same time, having that very closed off mindset of understanding companies got to pivot, and you may not see the vision now, but when it does come to fruition, most of you will not say you were wrong. Most of you wouldn't say that this was the best idea. Most don't. You know, the same way they dogged the Switch out before they knew exactly how it was going to come to fruition. And that's okay. Not all of us have that creative portion in our brain to know how to look at things from a futuristic standpoint to see where it's going to go. We are in a world of subscriptions. We are in a world of, you know, you don't own anything. Things are licensed because companies have found a way to give you something, make you think that you own it, and then continue to make money off of it. That's why we have free to play games that make more money than, you know, $50-$60 games, because they're going to continue to find ways to get money out of you through microtransactions. Things change, and like I said, we don't all like them, and they're not always for the best. But I think this move that Xbox is making is for the best, and that's solely because people chose to dog them out. And like I said, they have a horse in that race too, but at the same time, I felt like it was super overkill for how they were getting beat up, and it's in the midst of being in this console war nonsense. But understand, they are the first, but they damn sure won't be the last. That's been my video. Hopefully you like it. If you agree, disagree, leave comments down at the bottom. Keep it cordial. I don't have time for stupidity. If you want to actually talk about it, let's talk about it. But thank you all for your time. Thank you, Jeff Keighley, for this picture, because I just went to his X and just pulled it up. So, but yes, thank you all for your time. Thank you for viewing in. Love to hear from you. Continue to talk about this going forward. So it's been your boy Action Jack. I'm out. Peace.